People think red carpets are about glamour. They're not. They're about control, control of the cameras, control of the questions, control of the timing, control of what the public is allowed to feel. That night, for a few minutes, I broke the control. And I didn't do it to be noble. I did it because something in my chest tightened so fast it felt like a warning shot. Let me take you back. Warner Brothers lot, Burbank, cold air, hot lights. You step onto that carpet and it's a tunnel of noise. Reporters calling your name like you owe them something, flashes popping like the night's being electrocuted, publicists whispering 2 more stops, then we go in. Gran Torino was supposed to be a clean night, a celebration. I was 78, and the talk was that it might be the last time I acted in my own film. That kind of rumor brings out everybody. Big names, bigger egos, suits with earpieces, and a crowd that looks polite until you realize they're measuring your value in seconds. I'd already been walking that carpet a long time, interview after interview. Same questions dressed up in different words. What does the film mean to you? Is this your farewell? Do you relate to Walt? I'd answer the right way. I always did. Not because I'm a robot, because that's the job. You show up, you do the dance, you don't create problems. And then I was in the middle of one more interview. Bright lights in my eyes, a microphone angled toward my mouth, some entertainment host waiting for a quote about redemption. And I saw something over their shoulder. Not a celebrity, not a producer, not a photographer. A wheelchair. And a man in it, way back behind the barriers, shoved so far to the edge he might as well have been a shadow. He wasn't waving. He wasn't trying to get my attention. That's what hit me first. Most people on a carpet are reaching. This man was turned away like he'd already decided the night wasn't for him. His shoulders were shaking. You learn certain body language if you've lived long enough, watched enough people pretend they're fine. That wasn't excitement. That wasn't laughter. That was a man trying to keep himself together in public. I stopped talking mid-sentence. The interviewer kept her smile frozen, thinking I'd come back to the thought. Cameras kept rolling. Everyone was trained on me like I was the only thing that mattered. But the truth is, when you see something like that, the noise becomes background. It turns into a hum. Your brain does one simple calculation. If I ignore this, I'll remember it forever. I said, excuse me, just those 2 words, calm, plain. I didn't ask permission. I didn't explain. I turned away from the cameras. Yeah, away from 500 people who'd been fighting for a line. And I started walking toward the back. You could feel the crowd break, like the script got torn. Reporters looked at each other like, where's he going? Publicists panicked. Security moved. A few guards stepped into my path automatically, because on nights like that, everything is about keeping you moving forward. I told them quiet but firm. It's fine. Let me through. And here's the part people don't understand. I wasn't trying to make a point. I was trying to reach a person before whatever was happening inside him swallowed him whole. When I got close enough, I saw him better. Worn military jacket, hands gripping the armrests, face turned away like he didn't want anyone to see the tears. Beside him stood a woman, his daughter I'd learn later, trying to act strong, but her eyes were already wet. She looked like she'd been carrying him and her whole life for a long time. I leaned in a little and spoke to the man, not the cameras, not the crowd. Sir, I said, you're a veteran, aren't you? He turned his head slowly, like he expected someone else. When his eyes landed on me, his mouth opened and nothing came out. That's shock, real shock, not staged. Vietnam? I asked. He nodded once. Small movement, like it hurt to admit it. And right then, I looked at that barrier between us and I hated it. I didn't hate the medal. I hated what it represented. A line that said some people get the front row of life and some people get pushed back until they stop asking. So I did the simplest thing I could do. I climbed over it. At my age, people act like you're made of glass. That's nonsense. I swung a leg over, landed on the other side, and I knelt beside his chair so we were eye level. So he didn't have to tilt his head up to be acknowledged. The crowd gasped. Cameras started firing like it was the end of the world. I ignored them. What's your name? I asked. His voice came out as a whisper. James. I repeated it so he knew I heard him. James. Then I put a hand on his shoulder. Steady, not dramatic. Thank you for your service, I told him. Truly. And that's when he broke. Not a single tear. Full shaking sobs, the kind that come from a place so deep you don't even know it's still open until it splits. His daughter dropped down beside him, trying to comfort him, crying too. She looked up at me and said something like, "You have no idea what this means. Your movies, They kept him going. We just wanted him to see you, just once. I didn't answer with some polished line. I asked a question that mattered. How long have you been waiting? She hesitated like she was embarrassed to say it. Since 2 p.m. I repeated. She nodded. I looked at James again. Then at the wheelchair. Then at the entrance where the theater was waiting, where people in tuxedos and gowns were sitting comfortably, where the whole machine was ready to roll. And I asked him, have you seen the movie yet? He shook his head. No, sir, we couldn't get tickets. We just wanted to be here. That's when the decision happened. The one that made the night tilt. Because I knew something in that moment. If this movie is about a veteran finding a way back to meaning, and I let a real veteran sit in the back like he doesn't belong, then what the hell is the movie worth? So I turned to a guard and said, get David. They knew who I meant. David Webb, producer. The guy who could rearrange reality with a phone call. The guard stammered. Clint, the premiere starts in 10 minutes. I said, then you better get David quickly. When David showed up, he looked stressed before he even spoke, like he could feel schedule slipping. What's going on? He asked. I pointed at James. We're delaying the start, I said. David started, we can't. I cut him off, calm, no anger, just certainty. We're delaying the start because James is watching this movie tonight. I told him, front row, and I'm sitting next to him. David stared at me for half a beat, then nodded. He'd worked with me long enough to know when something wasn't up for debate. Then I said, and I want you to find out where he lives, what his situation is, medical care, housing, everything. Quietly. David looked at the daughter, then back at me. Okay, he said, I'll handle it. Now here's where people expect the story to end with a nice photo. A handshake. A quick escort. A God bless. And then back to the carpet. That's not what happened. I stood up, moved behind James's chair, and put my hands on the handles. James looked up at me like he thought I'd lost my mind. Sir, come on, I said. We're going in. And I pushed him onto the red carpet, not a staffer, not security. Me. Past the reporters who were still trying to process what they were seeing. Past the photographers who suddenly didn't know where to point their lenses. At the star, or at the man who mattered more in that moment. Past the VIP section where famous people turned and stood up without realizing they were doing it. His daughter walked beside us like she was afraid if she blinked it would vanish. You want to know what I remember most? The applause wasn't the usual polite Hollywood applause. It was messy. Honest. People clapping too hard, too fast, like they were trying to make up for something. We reached the entrance, and I turned because I wanted the room to understand what was happening. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, loud enough to carry. This is James. He served in Vietnam. He sacrificed things most of us can't imagine. Tonight he watches this film from the front row, because if anyone deserves to see a story about a veteran finding peace, it's a veteran who's been searching for it for 40 years. Then we went inside, front row, center. I placed his chair so he could see the screen without craning his neck, without people blocking him. I sat down right beside him. His daughter sat on his other side. I leaned in and asked him quietly, you ready? He stared forward, eyes red, voice shaking. I don't know what to say. I told him the truth. You don't have to say anything. Just watch. And if you're still watching this right now, do me a favor. Hit like and subscribe, because stories like this don't need cynicism. They need witnesses. And stay till the end, because the part that changed everything didn't happen on the carpet. It happened after the credits rolled. The movie started. I've watched my own films in theaters before. It's never comfortable. You hear every breath in the room. You feel every pause. You can sense when a line lands and when it doesn't. But that night, I wasn't watching the screen the way I usually do. I kept glancing at James, because his face was the real review when certain sounds hit. Sharp noises, sudden impacts. He flinched like his body remembered before his mind did. When Walt snapped at people, James didn't look offended. He looked familiar, like he lived in that anger. When the film slowed down and Walt's loneliness started showing through the tough exterior, James's eyes watered again. But he didn't turn away this time. He watched, like he was watching himself. By the time we reached the ending, his hands were trembling. Then the credits rolled and the room erupted in applause. But James didn't clap. He just stared at the screen like he'd been given something he didn't know he was allowed to have. I turned to him. What did you think? He swallowed hard. His voice came out raw. That was me, he said. I didn't interrupt. The anger, if he continued. The loneliness. The way it feels like you survived. But you didn't really come home. He paused, struggling to breathe. But the ending, he said. The ending gave me something. I asked, what? He looked at me, eyes swollen, and said one word, hope. And right there, right in that seat, something shifted for me too. Because I've heard people praise my work my whole life. I've heard critics, fans, directors, actors. I've heard award speeches and interviews and all the noise people use to decorate a career. But hope, coming from a man who looked like he'd run out of it, that meant more than any applause. I put my hand on his shoulder and said, James, you've always mattered. Now here's the part most people don't talk about. After that, there was an after party. Lights, music, congratulations. The usual parade, I went for a short while because you're expected to. I nodded, shook hands, smiled when I had to. But I couldn't stop thinking about James sitting in the back for 6 hours like he didn't belong. So I pulled David aside again, away from the crowd. And I told him, this doesn't end tonight. He looked at me like he was waiting for instructions. Find out his situation, I said. Not for a headline. For real. Where he lives, what care he gets, what he doesn't get, and then fill the gaps. David asked the question people always ask when they think in numbers. How much? I said, whatever it takes. Then I added, and don't stop at him. Find the others. How many veterans are sitting in the back of life because nobody bothered to move the barrier? That's the twist. The moment on the carpet was visible. What came after was quiet. James was moved into a place that fit his chair. Medical needs that were stuck in paperwork got handled. His daughter didn't have to carry every burden alone. And James, this part matters, James started changing. Not because pain disappears, it doesn't. But because when a man feels seen, truly seen, sometimes he starts believing he's still here for a reason. He reconnected with family he'd pushed away. He started showing up for other veterans. He started telling them, you're not done. And years later, when he passed, I showed up. No cameras, no speech for the public, just because it was right. So if you're watching this and you've ever felt like you're stuck behind a barrier, like everyone else is closer to life than you are, listen to me. You're not invisible. You're just surrounded by people who forgot how to look. And if this story hits you, share it. Send it to one person who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more stories like this, because the world has enough noise. What it needs is moments that remind us what matters. Now tell me in the comments, have you ever seen someone stop their important moment to help someone everyone else ignored? And if you've ever been that person in the back row, just type, I'm still here.